Tariffs are very, very sticky. Our biggest concern is the departure from a rules-based system. I had to call up Prime Minister. He said, we are going to do this. There is risk. He said, do it.
So a lot of you have been asking for us to do an episode on the tariffs, and there's few more qualified than our guest today to really comment on it. Please welcome Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Trade and Industry, Gan Kim Yong. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you.
All right.
So first DPM
Although
on
I
the show.
really can't see you.
That's true.
That jokes.
Even with jokes.
It started already. So before we dive into serious conversation, because I think we want to have that as well, something that I want to address first is that we started to do some digging and we found that on your Wikipedia page, right, under personal life, it's only 2 sentences.
Not much to read.
So only 2 words, personal life.
So we hope that you and the audience can indulge us in some softball questions.
Well,
So
why
you say softball?
I know. I have to.
Okay.
So that the audience know that this is intentional. In a new segment we like to call filling up your Wikipedia page. The first one I have. What are some of your hobbies?
well, I have quite a lot of hobbies. The one that I enjoyed most is really calligraphy. And I think it's quite a therapeutic hobby because first, if you really want to do a proper calligraphy, you have to sort of settle down. You need to calm down, and then you start to meditate, ponder about what is the word that you want to write.
Oh, wow.
And how
Is it
do you...
so serious though?
Yes, it's a very serious hobby. And you need to think about every stroke and how the word is going to be formed. When you write, actually, your emotion will be part of it. When you're very angry, your strokes tends to be very powerful, very aggressive. But when you're very happy, like coming to podcasts, you tend to be more flowing and you enjoy
You
the
are really
strokes.
selling this, eh?
Yeah.
I had a whole joke back up in my head waiting for you to finish. I decided not to drop it. Okay, I got one. How did you meet your partner?
Wow.
What's the romantic story? Romantic story always do well.
Well, we were both Christians and we met in the church event.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then...
Prevented by God.
that time I was around late 20s. At the end of that activity, I sent her home.
Wow.
And that's how it started.
For you lah, but for her, did the romance start there or not?
Then you have to ask her whether the romance started there or not. One thing led to another. Then we got engaged quite soon.
Right.
And after that, we got married quite quickly.
Wow, really a fast mover, actually.
Yeah.
But how do you ask her to be your girlfriend?
Huh?
What?
I'm curious. So, how did you get the call that you're going to be DPM?
I got a call from DPM at the time, Lawrence Wong, said that he wants to have a word with me.
Oh, yo.
Yeah, so I said, when the boss called, you better check what have I done wrong recently. So I quickly go to my email and see what's the big problem. And then I prepare all the talking points, this issue, how did I do this one? Oh, sorry, I did it wrong. So I prepare a thick file ready to be grilled. So then I went into the room. He said, okay, Kim Yong, I have a favor to ask of you. I want to appoint you as Deputy Prime Minister. So the first reaction is, huh? So first I said, I'm not 4G. I always tell him I'm 3.4G.
Yeah, you're pretty 4G lah.
3.4, you round down 3.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm younger among the 3G. So I said, okay, 3.4. I'm not quite 4G yet. So
You don't want to give
himself
himself 3.5. Yes, even sure it's lower.
3.4, you round up.
Wait, come on, this guy.
Basic mathematics.
That's right.
He really count. You cannot just say 3.5. I'm in between. No.
So I told him, I think you should really look for 4G ministers who can be Deputy Prime Minister that will accompany you through next few terms. So his point is that yes, I think he will do so in due course. But in the meantime, it is important to also have continuity and stability. But in the meantime, because I think being a new Prime Minister, there's a lot on his plates, and where I can help, I say I will do my best to help.
So after that meeting, you call your wife and then you say what?
Woo!
Well, I
Lower
didn't,
your volume when you speak to me. I'm DPM.
You see, husband and wife reaction always the same one. So she also went, huh?
Did she do anything wrong?
I thought you are 3.4G.
Why are you getting punished? No, but I appreciate it. I appreciate that PM said, I need to ask you a favor.
Yeah.
You never begin with, congratulations. Like that.
That's right.
Enough softball questions.
I think so too. So we'll move on. I mean, as you know, DPM, tariffs and trade is on everyone's minds at the moment. So at the time of filming, I think we've just heard that President Trump has upped the tariff on Chinese goods to 145%. And 1 week, the US slaps a blanket 10% on tariffs. The next minute, they pause it for 90 days. For many Singaporeans, like I think John Paul has admittedly mentioned to me as well, like he hasn't fully grasped like the severity of like the tariffs and how it will impact us. How would you explain the impact to both Singapore and like Singaporeans?
Well, I must be honest. We have also not really grasped the severity of the whole thing because the whole situation is still in the flux. The US has introduced a reciprocal tariff on almost every country, and they are differentiated based on different criteria, and therefore many countries are still grappling with the reality that they are going to have to face the tariff. And although the US has deferred the effective date for reciprocal tariffs for most countries, but the baseline tariff of 10% is already in place.
Which means in this 90 days, Singapore is still at 10%.
Yes. So I think the baseline tariff has already taken effect, and therefore we need to realize that there is a new era. It's a new era. It's a new world that we are facing. In the past, US was one of the champions of free trade. They wanted the world to have free trade, to have free flow of goods, so that the whole world can develop and progress together. But increasingly, they are beginning to introduce trade barriers, including tariffs, and therefore it's a new landscape that we have to deal with. And the ultimate impact really is something that we need to assess very carefully, and it will not be able to have a real specific assessment today. Part of the reason is because the outcome also depends on what other countries do. And as you can see, for some countries, after US tariff has been imposed, they have also imposed countermeasures, including retaliatory tariffs. And if this continues, then we will end up in a trade war, and eventually the whole economy may slow down. Because in these uncertain times, many businessmen and many investors will adopt a wait-and-see attitude, because you never know whether the tariff is going to be really be imposed and for how long it's going to be effective, whether there are going to be changes going forward. So they would have to take a step back and just watch the development before they make key decisions on investment or expanding their businesses. And the ultimate effect of this deferment of key decisions is that economy will slow down. And if economy slow down globally, I think Singapore being an open economy, we depend on the global economy to grow, to develop. And if the global economy slows down, I think our economy will also be impacted. And this will affect our companies, our businesses, and our workers eventually. In the meantime, negotiations are ongoing, and whether they will implement what they have announced earlier or whether it will be a lower tariff, again, is yet to be seen. So I think many things are still in the flux.
Yeah.
And the best thing we should do now is to focus on monitoring the development and always continue to encourage our businesses to remain competitive, our workers to continue to upgrade themselves, so that when the economy settles down, we are ready to continue to grow and expand our economy.
Are we seeing impacts already today? Are local Singaporean businesses already calling the government and sharing some of their problems?
We have received some of the feedback, some of the stories coming from the businesses. Some of them are asking us whether we can help them address some of the very specific issues. So I think all these are, again, changing very quickly. And that's why we have also set up a panel to be able to focus on looking at various aspects. One of the aspects is the really short-term impact on the companies. How do we help them cope with these changes and help them navigate through this very choppy waters ahead of us?
PM Wong recently made a response to the tariffs in Parliament, and I think there's been some debate, like the PSP, for example, suggested that some of the warnings have been overblown or that it was politically timed. Like, I'm wondering how do you navigate the challenge of like preparing Singaporeans about telling them that there is real economic headwinds while avoiding the perception that actually all of this is politically timed?
Let me relate back to what we did during COVID-19. I think one of the important lessons we learned during COVID-19 is that we have to be upfront, be transparent with our fellow Singaporeans. What we know, we tell them what we know. What we don't know, we tell them, frankly, we don't know yet. So I think the best approach really is to be honest, to be transparent, to share your information as much as you can so that Singaporeans and Singapore companies also know and understand what's the situation, can make their own plans.
Singapore is very reliant on trade, right? Like thinking about this long term, like how do we move forward as a nation if a lot of more countries are moving inward and more protectionist?
So I think we need to adopt a multi-pronged strategy. I think if we just continue to focus, just want free trade at all costs, I think it may not be possible. But it is possible for us to gather together like-minded countries to think about how we can strengthen collaboration and the economic linkages among these like-minded countries. I think there's a way forward. For example, I had a meeting with my ASEAN counterpart yesterday, and we talked about how we must come together and continue to further strengthen and deepen our collaboration within ASEAN. And our economies, to a very large extent, are complementary in nature. We can become a very attractive place for third-party investors to come to invest in ASEAN and take advantage of our complementary economies, particularly in new emerging areas like a green economy, digital economy. There's a lot of opportunity. We also talk about how ASEAN can be a catalyst to encourage other trading partners to have a relationship with ASEAN. Say, for example, we have ASEAN FTA with China, which we are negotiating the upgrade. And I think these are the areas that we can potentially work together. We also have a dialogue partner between ASEAN and EU to talk about how we can work together in some areas. So I think these are opportunities.
How did the free trade agreement hurt the US to begin with?
Well, under the free trade agreement, we have a commitment not to impose tariffs on one another. And therefore, if US or any country feels that this free trade agreement allows you to export to my country, hurting my own industries, and if my industries are not competitive, so I can't export to your country, even though you have zero tariffs on me,
Right.
Because my cost is higher, I can't sell to your country.
Right.
And in exchange, you're actually buying from some other countries, then I will feel that my free trade agreement with you is one-sided. So I need to somehow rebalance the free trade agreement, and therefore I would introduce tariffs on you. So just to be clear, I think free trade agreement does allow countries to introduce tariffs, but there are rules on how you impose these tariffs. And if you just impose the tariffs at will, I think that creates a problem. But if you follow the rules under the free trade agreement, there is provision for you to introduce tariffs when necessary.
Right.
Tariffs in its own is not against free trade agreement, but it's how you introduce it,
Right.
and the basis on which you introduce it, whether it's consistent with the free trade agreement provision. That's the question.
Right.
Is there a concern that if US could, potentially breach an FTA without consequences, that FTAs in the future would still be respected and adhered to?
Ultimately, our biggest concern is the departure from a rules-based system. Your point is a very important one, and it's a valid one. And if countries begin to ignore the free trade agreement that we have signed, and there's no rules governing trading relationship between each other, and countries are at liberty to raise tariffs and reduce tariffs and do what you like, I think it's going to be very difficult for countries to trade with one another, to build consensus, and to continue to grow a global economy as an integrated economy.
And so ASEAN was in consensus of that.
Yes.
I think it's important because I think one of the first things that I thought about when we look at the rules-based thing is that that puts every international agreement in question. For example, our water agreement. If people don't follow contracts anymore, and then, okay.
Were you surprised at all that Singapore's included, given that they have a trade surplus with us?
Well, we were surprised, as Prime Minister said, this is not something that the friend do to each other, but it is also something that we are in the process of finding out from them. And that's why in the Parliament I also said that one of the first things that we wanted to do is to reach out to the US, my counterparts, and to engage them and to see how we can have a better understanding of their approach and how did they determine that we should be given a 10% tariff, and whether there are anything that we can do to adjust and to better understand their concern so they can address their concern. If we are able to address their concern, whether they will be able to reduce the tariff. Right. If they are not able to reduce the tariff, because they did say that it's not for negotiation, I think whether they will hold on to that is something yet to be seen, but they have made it clear in the beginning that it's not for negotiation. It's a baseline tariff that everybody will have to pay. And even if that is the case, we also hope that in future, because this may not be the last round, in future, if there were new tariffs, at least we have a better understanding of where they are coming from, and they have a better understanding of our economic structure to take that into account when they do their calculations and when they determine the new set of tariffs in time to come. So I think this engagement and communication with our US counterparts is very important.
I'm assuming the whole world is trying to speak to your US counterparts as well. So are those communication channels open? Like,
actually, the question is, what is that diplomatic process? Because in the comment section of the internet, right, people say just call Donna and Asa, right? So is there a WhatsApp with your counterpart or
no?
Bro?
I think part of the challenge we have today is that the entire administration is still in the process of being appointed. Not all the posts
that's true.
Are filled because it's a new administration. The US Trade Representative and the Commerce Secretary have been appointed. So we are teeing up communication contact with them to see how we can sit down and discuss.
So it's an email, that's my question.
It's more than email. So sometimes you may need to involve face-to-face discussion, and you may need to share with them more details about our economy. So some of our team may have to fly up to the US. Some of the US leaders may be coming to this region, and we'll take the opportunity to show them what we have. So I think it's we need to have this communication at multiple levels, not just at the minister level, but also at the official level, and also from different channels, email, phone calls, WhatsApp, whatever it is, whatever works. I think it's important for this communication channel to be open, to stay open, so that we can have a constructive discussion on how to move forward.
As like a commoner,
layperson.
as like a
We are all commoner.
as a layperson who really doesn't have a complete grasp on this, right? From the outside, it looks like the things that are happening with the US are very unpredictable in a sense. Is it really that unpredictable, given like what you know and what you can see? And then also like, what are maybe like some of the preemptive measures that our government actually already has in place when things like that happen?
I think it is significantly volatile. And every morning when you open a newspaper, you have to first look at the headlines.
You actually open a newspaper?
Yeah.
I see. Okay, no, I'm just checking.
We still have newspaper.
They're still bringing it for him.
Yeah, but I must tell you that my staff is very efficient. They would have WhatsApp me before even I get off my bed. So the first thing I wake up, I look at my handphone, and it's always have a heart attack sometimes from time to time. So I think there will always be sort of earth-shaking news every morning.
Right.
But you just have to take it in your stride, because these are going to be the norm going forward. And you just have to be prepared to respond very quickly, and it impacts you. How do you deal with the situation? So I think Singapore also has the advantage of being very small, and the smallness of our country also allows us to move very quickly, very nimbly. Many of the things that we decide to change or we decide to introduce, we can do so quite quickly. So I think information sharing, sense making is going to be a very important part of the work of this new panel that's being set up.
What does the task force exactly do?
For the task force, we will share more details soon, because I was just appointed a couple of days ago.
You're always appointed to chair task force.
So I will need to assemble the team. Then we'll work through our action plan, what we want to do going forward. But I think the key, I briefly described in the parliament, we're going to look at three key thrusts. The first, as I mentioned earlier as well, is about information sharing and sense making. The second part, we do foresee that this flux, these changes in the tariffs will have immediate impact on some of our companies. And we do need to think about the short-term impact on these companies and how we can help them navigate. Some of them may be looking at switching the market to other countries. We may need to lean forward and help them to understand what are these new markets like and what are the opportunities available. And if they need to go to the new markets to explore and to understand the opportunities, then we have agencies that will be able to lean forward to help them, to guide them along in developing new markets. Then the third piece of the work is going to be a bit medium and longer term, because at the end of this tariff adjustments, I think, as I said, you are going to see a new world. So there is going to be a reshuffling of the deck, if you want, in the entire global supply chain, and we will need to help our companies adjust and to pivot away from what they have been doing today. And this is a medium to long term, because the switching of supply chain and production facilities cannot happen overnight. You need to set up factories, you need to develop the shipping line. It will take months and years.
But the world reset also presents a lot of opportunities, actually.
That's right. But it is important for our companies to be nimble. As I said, this is one of our strengths. They need to be nimble to be able to read the situation, to figure out that, well, this market is going to shrink. You may still be able to sell some of your products, but it may no longer be the same as before. So therefore, you need to develop new markets for your products. And they may also figure out that this particular product I'm producing is no longer competitive. Someone else will be able to do it more competitive than us because they have a more favorable tariff environment, for example. And then therefore, it may be important for me to develop new products and new services. So I think it's both new markets, new products, and new services that will emerge. So I think it's not just about cutting down our production and deal with the tariffs, but as you said, there will be new opportunities, and we have to be in front of the pack so that we are among the first to find out these opportunities and help our companies seize these opportunities.
So
I think that way we'll be ahead of our competitors.
What's your thoughts on China's position in all of this? A couple of days ago, they were the last bastion of resistance, and today they are standing alone in the fray.
China, in the longer term, you have to understand that China will continue to be a major economic powerhouse. And their manufacturing capability has evolved and developed over the last couple of decades, and they are very efficient, very cost-effective, and so they will continue to be a major manufacturing base for many of the products in the world. So I think it is not easy even for US and China to be totally decoupled. I think they will try to be less dependent on each other. But I think to be totally decoupled, I think is going to be very difficult. From Singapore's perspective, we really hope that China and US can sit down and discuss the way forward in a constructive way. Eventually, the tariff may settle at a certain level. They may have some concessions from either direction, but we hope that eventually there will be stability, clarity, and of course, opportunity for all of us to continue to do business with both China and US. That is very important, not just for Singapore and for the rest of the world too.
On the point of protectionism and nations shifting towards that approach, right? It feels like it's a step backwards, right? So then, is it a matter of now it's like kind of like a bit more reaction?
Is it a cycle, right? Is
it that we are going to take a step back and then hopefully when things pan out again, then we have to go back to get back to where we are before we can move forward again?
It is a very sensible question, a very important question. And in fact, it's a question that we've been asking ourselves. Because my fear is that it's a major step backwards. I'm less optimistic that we are going to go back to where we were before. I don't think that's possible. Right. And even if you want to get back to a negotiating table to push ahead with free trade and for everyone to have consensus that free trade is good for everyone, I think that will also take a long time before we can arrive at that point.
It feels like it could be a next term thing, though.
I'm not so optimistic that by next term it will reverse. I think this trend, once it's set in, once momentum picks up, is very difficult to slow down and to reverse. Even the next term government administration will have to figure out how can I reduce the tariffs, because once you reduce the tariff, you have influx of imports. and they are going to then face the pressure from the local domestic businesses and
I see.
workers. And you also have to figure out that if you have this tariff protection, you're trying to bring businesses back to US. And if indeed some of the investors have decided to invest in US, you can't remove that tariff in 5 years. And then what are the businessmen going to do?
Yeah.
They've just invested in the US. So I think tariffs are very, very sticky. Once you introduce, it's very difficult to reduce or to remove.
Especially
it will
when
take
all
a
the
long
factories,
time.
all the manufacturing go
Yes.
back.
Otherwise, nobody will believe you next time because I've just invested billions of dollars in a new factory, and you announce that you're going to reduce the tariff. Then where's my protection? So I think that's why, by nature, tariffs are very, very sticky. And even if they decide to go back to the negotiating table to talk about free trade, it's going to be a very slow process.
I also read that Singapore made over $200 million in investment in the space sector, which is a lot of
Also
money.
Also you, wow.
Why is Singapore interested in space?
Well, I must say that one of my childhood dream is to be an astronaut. But
But that's not why we did it. Lah.
But I must make it clear, our space strategy was not built on my dream to be an astronaut. In fact, we have been working on the space strategy for many years now.
Why do we need a space strategy?
From an economic point of view, because in recent years, there's a surge in the interest and growth in the space sector. In the past, it's restricted to mainly accessible by the large economies, huge economic powers, because you need a lot of investment. But in the recent years, with the advance in the technology, particularly manufacturing technology, many of these facilities, whether it's launch engines, rockets, and space equipment, has become a lot more cost-effective and a lot more accessible by the smaller companies and smaller economies. And therefore, there's a surge in the interest in this sector. Secondly, is the demand-driven, because with the emergence of the demand for connectivity and for telecommunication, driven by AI, generative AI, that you need a lot of connectivity, and with the 5G network and so on, you need a lot of communication network, and including satellite communication. This will drive the need for space technology, and satellite is part of the space technology. And Singapore is strong in the telecommunication technology. So I think there is a lot of opportunities for us.
Singapore
to
is
explore.
strong in telecommunication.
That's right.
Did not know
In
that.
technology, telecommunication technology, and therefore I think we have this opportunity to explore this space sector, particularly for communication.
Right.
And the third reason is also because with AI and new capability in the computing, we also are beginning to look at Earth observation from satellites. So there's a lot of interest, particularly with the sustainability related issues, and also with climate control, climate change. And you do want to monitor what's happening to the whole world, and to help you do maybe weather forecasts, whether there's a typhoon, there's a natural disaster happening. So there's an Earth observation initiative that we just launched a couple of months ago. The whole world is gaining interest, observing changes in the Earth situation. Best to be done from space, and therefore space technology has an interest and has a role to play.
So it's satellites lah, not Singapore.
No one's going to space lah.
But if given a chance, you will go lah.
Yeah, if there's like one thing you're gonna abuse your authority on.
If I can pass my physical test.
So, I mean, legacy is obviously easier to look at in hindsight by definition. And during your time as Minister for Health, you play a key role in shaping and steering several major healthcare initiatives. I think MediShield Life was one, a significant reform that made healthcare insurance available for all. There was also the expansion of CHAS, which really helped lower to middle income families. You were also involved in the Pioneer Medica Generation packages. There were all these things, right? As your time in MTI, what do you hope that list of achievements look like?
I actually inherited a strategy that was introduced or implemented by many predecessors. Not many people realize or understand this. Actually, the health strategy, our health policies, is longitudinal, and it straddles over multiple decades. We started off looking at healthcare, how to keep people healthy. This happens many years ago. Rather than treating diseases, we should really treat health, how to keep people healthy. Because at the end, I'm a Ministry of Health, not Ministry of Diseases. So our focus should be keeping Singaporeans healthy. There are many pieces we need to put in place. And these take decades to put in place because healthcare system is a very huge system, very difficult to change. MediShield Life is one of the transformation that we need to undertake to transform our healthcare financing piece of this, keeping Singaporean healthy. The second piece that is very important, and that is CHAS. And CHAS is actually a transformation of the primary care system. It's not just giving CHAS and providing the discount and subsidies, but we leverage on CHAS to transform the whole primary care.
So primary care is just to exercise?
Primary care is really preventing your chronic diseases from worsening. And that doesn't require hospitals. But like every country, our first investment is always in acute hospitals because that's where you deal with heart attacks and so on. So very acute episodes, you need a very good hospital. We started with that. But actually to change the population's health, primary care is the most important. Much more important than hospitals. And therefore, we need to undergo that transformation of primary care. And after me, Minister Ong Ye Kung took over as a health minister. He's continuing the journey. He introduced Healthier SG. Because now we have put most of the pieces in place. There are still a couple more pieces we need to do, but most of the pieces are in place. So he's able to launch this Healthy SG, get people to go to your clinic, not because you're sick, but because you want to stay healthy. So I think that is the key message of this Healthier SG
that was
strategy.
Lost to me, if I'm being honest.
So therefore,
it was gyms there.
Yeah, gyms is part of it. One of the breakthrough that we have today is that we have persuaded our doctors to do social prescribing. Whenever you go to a doctor, they always say, take 2 Panadol, this and that, and I'll give you a prescription, and go to the pharmacy, take your drugs, and home you go. But today we have social prescribing. You go to see your doctor under this Healthy SG. The doctor will tell you, you need to cut down on your laksas. You need to stay away from your durians. You need to exercise 20 minutes a day, things like that. So this is lifestyle prescription.
I thought must meet your friend.
Like meet your friend 2 times a day.
Right, go kiss your wife.
Yeah, it's also very important to have your social circles because it's got to do with your mental health. So the next thing, which Minister Ong also rolled out, is healthy aging.
Healthy aging.
So the idea is to keep you healthy when you're young, so that when you age, you continue to be healthy and continue to be active, so that you can have a really fulfilling aging journey.
Speaking of aging, I read that you were mistakenly described once as the aging minister. How did that come about? Apparently, you were the minister in charge of aging.
Yes, I was asked to take charge of aging portfolio, dealing with all the aging-related challenges and solutions. So they always call me, you are the aging minister. So I always have to...
You never asked that, why you ask me to do? Why never ask Ye Kung to do?
Now Ye Kung is in charge.
Yes. So you clearly do a lot, and with general election around the corner, which could be in the next days or weeks or months, and you have to go and prove yourself to the voters again. What's your biggest concern?
I think our focus is really on the voters, the residents. I always tell my voters my residents in Choa Chu Kang that our focus is on you. Our interest is really how to continue to improve your life and how to continue to build Choa Chu Kang town into a vibrant town, a home that we love. It's also beyond just hardware improvement, but also how do we roll out programs so that we can integrate the community better, to be more inclusive, to be more caring, and this way I think we will then be able to develop and build a home that all of us will cherish. The most important thing is always focus on residents and the interests of the residents, and to help residents solve their problems and their concerns. I think that's the way we go, and the focus that my team and I will focus on.
We briefly talked about you leading the new task force, but you also co-chaired the COVID-19 task force. Besides being transparent with the public, do you see any parallels or any lessons that you took from chairing that to now?
You need to be very responsive. Crisis was evolving. Every day you have new information about the virus, and it could be totally different from what you thought it was before. Let's say, for example, on the testing. We have relied on the PCR testing all this while, it's a gold standard for testing of a virus. It's accurate and it's precise. And the trouble with the PCR is it takes a long time for the test results to come back, and it takes more than a day, sometimes 2-3 days before you can get the result. And if in the initial days when you have only a handful of patients, infected people, you can still do that. But when you have 1,000 a day, 2,000 a day, you just can't rely on PCR anymore. So we had to switch to, if you remember, ART rapid test, right? And when we switched to ART, I think the professionals were up in arms. They said, this is totally inaccurate. You can only have 70% accurate. You have a lot of wrong diagnosis. But then we eventually have to discuss and decided that being able to test only 10% of the population with 100% accurate and miss out the 90%, it's better to test 100% with 70% accuracy.
Right.
You still get a lot more accurate results than to rely on PCR. So we decided to make a decisive shift. So that was one example where we were a little bit fixated on the traditional way of doing things,
Right.
and end up allowing perfection to be the enemy of good.
Yeah.
So we decided, no, we have to switch, and then we switched to ART, and that helped us to address some of the infection. The last thing that we need to do, other than being transparent, being responsive, is also to do the right thing. I think in a crisis, it's very tempted to do the popular thing. And if you remember when we introduced a circuit breaker, everybody was upset because basically the whole country came to a grind to a halt. Therefore, many people were upset, but we decided that we have to do it in order to give our hospitals a breathing space, we get them ready, because we expect a major wave of infection to come because the whole world is blowing up. So we decided to have a circuit breaker. And even when we lift the circuit breaker, it's very difficult to lift it. Imposition is difficult, but lifting is even more difficult because you remember we have rules on how many people dining together.
Yeah.
We sometimes went to 2, from 2 to 5, to 5 back to 2, and then to 4, and then 4 back to 2, and then went to 8 or something, right?
Yeah.
That was the exact order. That's crazy.
One step forward, half a step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So people get very upset.
Yeah.
And but we decided that we have to protect the elderly, we have to protect the population and protect the healthcare capacity. So we adjust that based on how much capacity we have in the hospital. If we want to
that was what it was based on.
climb down the infection, because you can't stop infection, but you want to prevent severe outcome.
Yeah.
And therefore, you want to make sure the hospital has capacity to deal with severe cases. So I think there will be difficult decisions, but you must always make your decision based on facts,
it's true.
based on statistics, based on what is the right thing to do.
Like when you have to announce something that is probably unpopular, like circuit breaker, or like having to roll back from gathering of 5 to 2, did that press conference feel particularly nervous? Like, do you feel like, oh no, like daunting that you have to announce this?
I did feel nervous, but it's not so much because the decision is the wrong one, but more, how can I communicate in a way that people understand why we need to do that? Because it's not just imposition from the top. If you don't explain, people will be very upset and they will not follow the rules. So you have to explain why do we need to do this, so that people do it knowing that it's unpleasant, it's unhappy, but they know that it's something that's necessary. To be honest, I think we also fumble a little bit from time to time in the communication. Sometimes we make the rules are so complicated, people don't understand. And when we try to explain why we need to do that, they also cannot understand, cannot figure out. Bubble tea was one example. If you remember, we clamped down on bubble tea and said we should not have allowed bubble tea. But then people ask, then what about coffee? What's the difference between bubble tea and coffee? Yeah. Right? I mean, you can go back and check what was the reason.
Yes.
There was a reason, there was a valid consideration, but it's very difficult to explain and to communicate. So eventually one of the lessons we learned is keep it simple in a crisis. Sometimes you don't have a perfect solution, you don't have a perfect measure, but it is better to have a simple measure that everybody can understand and easy to comply, rather than to have a perfect solution that nobody knows how to do it.
I feel like you've been at the front lines of a lot of very important moments, right? And
Crisis moment, you mean?
yeah.
Until now, so
What is when you think back to all of like the most Maybe some of the most stressful days that you've had, right, in your life. Like, is there any particular one that comes to mind?
Everyone is stressful and painful. Yeah.
Which is the most peng
Is
kueh
there a
one?
particular one?
If you remember, we had data outbreach in one of our hospital system, and because there was a hacker that came in, and we had to work 24 hours overnight for several days to protect the data, to make sure that we preserve what we have and keep the hackers out of the system. We have to then restore the system carefully. I think that process was very painful. The most challenging part is we actually had to shut down the digital system and go back to manual system for a while before we fix the problem and allow the digital system to come back on. To switch from a digital system to a manual system, you can imagine
Across all the hospitals.
first across that particular hospital, and then after that, I think all the hospitals have to
Upgrade already,
reset.
yeah.
Have to reset, and then we need to make sure that when you switch over the manual system works, because if it doesn't work, patient's life is at stake. As a health minister, I had to make a phone call to the CEO of that hospital and say, "Can you do it?" He said, "Don't worry, Minister, we can do it." So I said, okay. Yeah, then the next thing I did was I had to call up Prime Minister. That time was Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, and said, "We are going to do this. There is risk, but we have to do it because the hacker is in the system. So we need to get rid of the hacker and we need to shut down the system." Then Prime Minister was very good. He said, "Do it."
Wow.
So I went ahead and do it.
It's like
Unfortunately,
the movies, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
no major hiccups, and we switched over to the manual system. Fortunately, I think the switching back was quite smooth. In a way, I'm very happy at the end of the day because it also shows that our healthcare system, our healthcare leadership is of very high quality. They will stand up in a crisis. And if you can imagine, if when I call the CEO say, maybe let me check before I get back to you. Then I said, "Wow, jialat liao lah." But she was very confident. She said, "Don't worry, Minister, we can do it."
Mr. Lee sees his name on the phone. He's stressed. Didn't do anything wrong.
Alright guys, so that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much to Deputy Prime Minister Gan for joining us. We'll see you in the next one. Like, share, subscribe. Bye-bye.
Do y'all ever apply leave and travel together? Like in your years in cabinet, right? Have you ever y'all apply leave together, right? Then two ministers go on holiday together.
Together in the same trip?
Yeah, no lah, like
every day.
Yeah lah. Sweet kid, you want go Bangkok, right? Kind don't have Then we shall have
Together in time, but not in space.
Oh, che, you got my hopes so high.
Yes, yeah.
I thought you were about to describe your bro straight away.
Wow. That's a bit creepy, you know.
No, like a double date lah. You bring your wife, they bring your wife.